What's going on YouTube? JT is Reborn here, and welcome back to another edition of my Godzilla comic book reviews. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Godzilla Rivals, Biollante versus Destoroyah! That's right, the latest Godzilla IDW comic came out this week, and I'm just now getting around to covering it. Yeah, it's been kind of a Sean's off to the side sort of week, but here we go. Let's go ahead and get started talking about this thing. This one is written by Nick Marino with artist Sean Dove. Great name, by the way, and spelled properly. Fantastic. Design and letters by Nathan Whittick. Color assist Andrew Masico. Editor David Marriott. Supervising editor Tom Waltz, editor Jasmine Joyner, and as you can see here, it's Biollante versus Destoroyah. So there really is no, there's a Godzilla cameo of sorts and kind of a flashback sequence with our main doctor character here, and that's about it. But it's primarily Biollante versus Destoroyah in a plot that I really wasn't expecting. It takes a very unique approach to it, but that's the thing I like a lot about these Godzilla Rivals is even though they are kind of standalone comic books, they do take interesting routes with how they get these monsters to fight, stuff you generally wouldn't see in the movies. So there are some unique ideas in some of this, and the way this thing kind of goes down is a rather nightmarish kind of version of it. As you can see, the art style here by Sean is a lot more lighthearted, definitely seems more geared towards kids, more upbeat, more positive, but there's kind of something sinister with the plots of the villains this time around. So you have this BLOOME corporation led by, I'm just going to call her Poison Ivy. She's got red hair, and she's obsessed with plants, and she can seemingly control them and has all these other crazy things going on. Her background and all that's still kind of a vague mystery, but in this issue, we have the entire world addicted to this beverage, and everyone's kind of wondering what it is, but basically this beverage ends up being made of Biollante spores, so everybody's literally who's been addicted to this thing for a while has been drinking Biollante stuff. And we have this guy named Needles, and we have this doctor right here who was kind of a disgraced kaiju researcher, and they do find out that it is made from the spores of Biollante. And basically Poison Ivy over here, she has a name, but I'm just going to call her Poison Ivy because that's pretty much what she is trying to take over the world. The people who have been drinking Biollante spores end up becoming like Biollante themselves, which I think has some nice, cool horror elements to it where people are turned into kaiju like this. It's an interesting idea, and I kind of like that approach with Biollante. But in terms of how Destoroyah is brought into the mix, our favorite kaiju researcher here pretty much recreates them with her data, if you will. And so now we have little Destoroyahs running around, and they have to fuse together, and they kind of go toe-to-toe with Biollante, if you will. And Destoroyah is carrying a giant pencil and stabs Biollante, which is something I never would have expected. It's a very unique and interesting visual, if you will, and I think it definitely makes for a memorable sense of combat. I do like the art here in terms of the combat styles. The human designs, maybe not my personal favorite, but I do like the monster action that we get in this thing. And we at least get a more monster action than some other issues that we've had. I think the last one I covered was the Titanosaurus one, where we only had like 2 panels. So some of these stories would benefit from more chapters, but they are pretty much just standalone things. So you have to kind of get behind things rather quickly, which I understand. Although I would like to see some follow-ups to particular issues in this thing, maybe a couple issues of a story rather than just one large 50-page issue, if you will. But, I get my money's worth in general. But yeah, so Destoroyah goes in, comes its ultimate form, battles Biollante. It's a battle of characters that people, I think, have wanted to see for a while, unless you play the video game. So this is the first time they're really kind of colliding. Maybe they collided in Rulers of Earth or one of the other IDW comics or something, I'm sure. But this is primarily Destoroyah versus Biollante. There is no Godzilla as himself appearing in this particular issue, if you will. It is focused on this. Destoroyah just gets his shit wrecked by Biollante. It's not even close. So Biollante is clearly established as the more powerful foe right here. Destoroyah doesn't even stand a chance. But again, this is kind of a recreated Destoroyah, a recreated Biollante, if you will, from the spores of fusing into people. And then our favorite scientist over here is able to kind of take Biollante down by the end of it, and everyone else is kind of cured of their stuff. But I think some of it kind of reminds me a bit of like the Rampage video games, where you had people turned into monsters, if you will. Poison Ivy, if you will, over here. I know she has a name. That's pretty much what she is. She does get squashed, so that's kind of cool. But I want to know her backstory, like what led her to wanting to take over Biollante and just destroying the world. So if this were Poison Ivy, this would make for an interesting like DC Comics and Godzilla crossover. Poison Ivy, Biollante, it just kind of fits the mold, if you will. But yeah, I mean, as it stands, I was pretty entertained by the issue for the most part. Like I said, art style works just fine. I think it works best in the combat sense. It's definitely it feels more like geared towards kids in it, but then again, you have people being turned into Biollante, and you have somebody here who's creating Destoroyah to fight Biollante, which is a very unique approach. Why you wouldn't bring him out? I don't know the world that it's fully established. I mean, because some of these things are pretty much all these are just standalone. So you don't really know the background of the setup going into it. So you just kind of have to accept the ridiculousness of it all. So as it stands, I did find myself entertained by it. I think the concept of people being turned into Biollante is kind of interesting. Like I said, it reminds me of the Rampage video games where the people were experimented on and became some of the monsters themselves in their human forms, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that is an interesting approach to go with the material, and as it means to get these two monsters to fight, it's a story I wouldn't have expected going into like. So at least it's unique. It has a unique art style, and the story is interesting enough to kind of carry you through it up until you get to the good monster action. And Biollante just wrecking the shit out of Destoroyah was kind of surprising, and of course the humans come in and basically just use their weed be gone to finish off Biollante. But I think for the most part, this is an entertaining issue. What was the last one? The Titanosaurus one? I think that one I like too. I mean, I like all these rival comic books. I mean, I'm a Godzilla fan, so I kind of know what I'm getting into with a lot of these ones. And at least this one delivers more action, I think, than the previous one, and you actually get the monsters fighting, like destroying his various forms. But as you can see, Destoroyah gets kind of wrecked rather easily over the course of this thing. The two lead characters, I think, were fine. You have Needles, who's basically just this hacker character, and you have a disgraced kaiju researcher who has to kind of ultimately save the day. In terms of the main villain, who, like I said, I'm just calling Poison Ivy in this thing, it would have been nice to have gotten a little bit more background on her and why she kind of did things the way she did. But since it's only a single issue, you're not really given enough time to get that background across in it. But I think it still works for the most part. So, like I said, if I just think of her as Poison Ivy taking care of Biollante because she just looks the part and all that, got the red hair and all that, then I think it works just fine. So, that in my mind, she's basically just Poison Ivy teaming up with Biollante to take over the world. So, throw in Batman and Godzilla, and then you have something really, really cool here. But as it stands, it's a cool crossover, and it's giving us matchups that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like I said, I like Biollante and I like Destoroyah, and I'd really like to see them make another appearance in a movie, because as it stands, they've only really been in the two movies as themselves. Obviously, there's flashback footage of Biollante and some of the other Heisei films. I think it was Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, or in Space Godzilla, right? Yeah. Things are getting molded together, but I would really like these two monsters to make another appearance at some point. I think it would be kind of cool. So we'll see where things go from here, but I mean, I was pretty entertained by it. I like the IDW Godzilla comics. With the Godzilla Rivals thing, as I said before, when you get different artists and writers on this stuff, you can get some interesting and unique stories that stand alone and do some interesting stuff with the IPs, if you will, and get these monsters to fight in rather creative circumstances. And I think the fights going into this were kind of creative, and the setup was interesting enough. I just wish I kind of had more of it. So, but again, it's a standalone single issue. You have to kind of accept that going into it. But I would like to see more within some of these worlds that they've kind of set up with these Godzilla Rivals comics. So anyways, I have rambled on long enough. If you have any thoughts on the issue, let me know in the comment section down below. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content, hit the bell for notifications. That is all I have to say for today. I'll be back doing some more DC comic book stuff later on this week. I just want to get this video out before the end of the week because I haven't really posted any videos at all this week. So look forward to all that stuff. And as always, take care now. Bye-bye then, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.